In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the witching hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. Tonight, our topic is Loftus Hall. We're reaching out for all those Irishmen and Irish ladies out there. So, our guest tonight, or really not guests, my co-hosts tonight are Jennifer Verne, Research Manager and Podcast Director.
Good evening.
And Heather Lawson, Case Manager and Podcast Director.
Hello.
Alrighty, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit, we're going back to our Irish roots. And by the way, I just want to make this very clear that, a lot of people don't realize this. St. Paddy was a Scotsman. That's really true. People don't believe that, but research, it's really true. Anyway, I'll hand this over to Jennifer and let her start us off on Loftus Hall.
Okay. Well, once again, I was talking to my husband about doing the research, and I said to him, can't I ever research a location's story and not find the holes in the story, please?
No.
I don't think it's possible,
It's not
is
how
it?
it works, no.
Because the game of telephone just keeps going down through the ages.
Well,
Right?
one of the things I remember when I was a Sea Cadet before I got, in the full Navy, they did a thing called the telegraph wire, because in the Navy, they consider any kind of room or anything scuttlebutt. They call it scuttlebutt.
Right.
So they wanted to show what happens when you don't have good skills. And they put one guy, there was 30 people, they put 15 on either side. One guy was on a pair of Soundpower telephones. He would receive a message, and he had to relay it verbally. And every person... And then when it gets to the end, and I'm sure you've all seen this done in
this
school.
is the game that we play as a child, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the time it gets to the end, it's nothing. Like
Never.
I never will forget, because the company commander goes, "That's why we goddamn lost Vietnam, right there." And I'll never forget it. I like that. I go, holy shit. And anyway, but yeah. I mean, but that's true. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen over time and being retold. And I mean, that as a research manager, it's just incredible. So.
But I'll say again, just because the story that you hear is incorrect does not mean that the paranormal activity does not exist or does not have an origin.
What's the old saying from X-Files? All lies lead to the truth.
There you go. I
love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I got the poster of it somewhere. I always found that having come out of the intelligence community, that's it.
We always have something somewhere.
Yes. That's right. You can always trace it, because there was somewhere there was a reason that started.
House.
Pardon?
I meant in our house. We always have something somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. If the sad part's when you go to some place to buy something, and my wife goes, "Do we have one of these?" I go, "We got 2 of them. Don't buy any more of those." Yeah. Yeah. It's always here.
All right. So we're going to Loftus Hall, County Wexford, Hook Peninsula, Ireland.
I bet that's a beautiful place, too.
Oh, I Googled, I Google Earth everything I research.
Both times I've been over there, I've never got to go to Ireland, but it looks, one thing I love about gorgeous. The whole countryside in Wales and Scotland, it's always green. And at least when I was there, summertime, but it was very nice.
This is very rocky, because it's called Hook Peninsula for a reason. It's a little peninsula, and it's hooked, and it's out in the middle. I mean, it's maybe half a mile wide down here at the bottom, where the lighthouse sits, if that. I mean, and where Loftus Hall is, up further from the peninsula. Loftus Hall is a little bit off the shoreline. There's like a field between it and the shoreline and the beach line. But then on the other side, maybe half a mile from the Loftus Hall to the other shoreline.
Yeah.
So it's windy. It's windswept. It is prime location.
Your typical point with a lighthouse. Yeah.
So the large country house that sits on the east side of the Hook Peninsula in County Wexford, Ireland, is not the first castle on this site.
Okay.
So we're going to go back 1170.
That seems to be a thing with England, Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
They rebuild on top of old castles because the rocks are already there. The stones are
Old
there.
castles are rebuilt on top of old castles. Manor houses are built on top of manor house. We tangent.
Sure.
We go off on tangents. Here's a little tangent. I am stuck on YouTube videos from Time Team, and it's a UK-based archaeological program.
Really?
From
Never heard of that.
1993 through the mid to 2013, and now they've brought it back. They take 3 days, and they volunteer their time. I believe that some of them may be paid, but I think the archaeologists volunteer their time. And they go and they excavate archaeological sites all over the UK.
Oh, wow.
And they get 3 days, and they do the dig, they do the geophys, they do... It's addicting.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. It's called
there
Time
you go,
Team.
folks. Yeah, I'm going to...
I know what we're doing.
Oh,
Yeah. Well,
once you start, you can't stop. It's like Lay's potato
kind of a
chips.
side
You ain't going to
note,
stop.
I put my application in to be a fellow for the Scottish Antiquities Association, which, if you support them, then you get to add FCA at the end of your name because you become a fellow of the society. And, over here, it helps support the arts and what they're doing over there. So that was one of the things. And a lot of the guys in the Indianapolis Sky Society had done that, so needless to say, I followed suit. But, yeah, to me, that sounds like 3 days. That's thin on a site.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. And they have to pick and choose where they're going to go. And I'm telling you, I could do a whole podcast today just on what they found and what I've been watching.
That's pretty cool. We'll have to look that up.
It's a lot of fun, guys. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
okay.
That's outstanding.
Back to the topic at hand.
All right.
Loftus Hall. Okay, so 1170, a man named Raymond Le Gros landed on the west side of the hooked spit of land, and he established a site called Bag and Bun. It comes from two words, which were the names of his ships, Le Bag et Le Bon.
Are we talking Frenchman here?
He's a Frenchman.
Ah.
Yep, he's a Frenchman. And he came over and established that in preparation for his, I can't think of the word his benefactor.
Oh, okay.
Richard de Clare. And he was the second Earl of Pembroke. Le Gros, that's a proper pronunciation, then moved to the east side, and he built himself Houseland Castle.
Okay.
So Bag and Bun is up on the east side of the peninsula, all the way up where the peninsula meets the land.
Okay.
Okay, and then so Le Gros came down the peninsula over to the west part of the island, and he built Houseland Castle. It wasn't until 1530 that the Redmond family came into possession and built their own castle, and this was named Redmond Hall, or the Hall.
The Hall.
Now, here comes our first little hiccup in the story. We don't know for sure if the Redmond family is different or if Raymond became Redmond.
Could be.
Or Raymond became
And that's
Redmond
not unusual back then.
It's not. No. It's not. So it's possible that the Redmond family are descendants of Raymond Le Gros.
Yes.
But it's possible it's completely different line. We're not sure. The Redmond family kept it until the 1640s, during the time of Oliver Cromwell.
Yes.
Okay. And again, me being a history buff,
Yeah.
UK is my favorite history of all. I can pretty much name all the British monarchy from 1066 when the Conqueror forward.
If I ever got the amount of money that I would like to have, I would take the whole team. We'd do a site over there, and we just fly over, spend the week, and go through some place.
Warwick Castle, please.
Oh, the
Warwick
guys.
Castle.
That's the greatest thing in the world. My special private tour of the tower was one thing that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And I got some brothers over there, and reach out to all those. I don't think they listen, but if they do, hey, we appreciate everything you do. So.
Yeah.
And we got a special paranormal investigator over there that talks to us pretty often.
Yeah, MJ.
Yeah, so this reaches out to MJ as well.
That's right. So Oliver Cromwell. You either love him or you hate him.
Yeah, and that seems to be the way of it over there. Yeah, that's
really
the way
and truly,
of it.
Yeah, really and truly. So this was a time of upheaval with him. And in 1649, the Redmonds actually lost claim to the land because they surrendered. And a capitulation of that surrender was they had to give up their land. So the land was given to planters. Now, this is not farmers. This is planters. These are Englishmen that have come over and been planted in Ireland to stake claim to Ireland as English.
And that's not unusual during that period of time.
No. So it was kind of a spoils of war, maybe. But in 1666, Nicholas Loftus, the son of Henry, moves into the hall, and thereafter it has been named Loftus Hall. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to backtrack just a second because Oliver Cromwell, there is a phrase, by hook or by crook. Right?
Oh, yeah.
We've all heard that, right? Yeah. I'm going to get that by hook or by crook.
That was a naval phrase for whenever you had to appropriate items.
Right,
by
exactly.
hook or by crook. Yeah.
So it's possible that Oliver Cromwell is the origination of this saying because Oliver Cromwell wanted to take Waterford, either by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
So hook is on the Wexford side of the Waterford estuary, and Crook is a village over on the Waterford side. So it is claimed that he said that he would take Ireland either by hook or by crook. However, it's possible that this phrase was used about 260 years before Cromwell. So another custom of regulating firewood by local people, you could take firewood from the common land.
Yes.
They were only allowed to take the branches they could reach with a billhook or a shepherd's crook.
Ah.
So you could take your firewood by hook or by crook.
So
who knows? But I thought it was interesting.
I got to introduce you to this book when the I got another tangent, but when the
we tangent. That's
what I think people like about this show. But when the Tower Lodge guys come in from Masonic Lodge over in England, one of them before he left, he said, "I want you to come back." And he says, we give these things. It's kind of like what would most people think nowadays, probably Harry Potter, Hallcroft. But they said, we're going to leave you a book. You have to return it. It's required. It doesn't have a date or time, but before you die, you have to bring it back to us. And it's all the traditions. It talks about, minding your P's and Q's. That comes from Pints and Quarts. It's a great book. I'm sure you want to borrow it sometime.
I do.
It's a friend of mine.
She definitely does now.
Yeah, I tell you what, one of the greatest brothers, he loaned that to me. He gave it to me. He says, "Brother," he says, "you would be so much happier in England." He says, "You should come." And I came twice, but he kept telling me, he says, "You keep the book." He says, "You've enjoyed it far more than I do, and I live here." He says, "You just keep it." But one of the things he said, we were talking about Cromwell, and he said, if you ever meet him as a ghost, I said, "Yeah." He says, "Keep your hand on your wallet, lad." And I always had to laugh because it's no different than people always say, well, in America, there's a division between the southern states and northern states. It goes back to the Civil War. And I found this out when I went to Gatlinburg one time. We passed through what would be called either Sevierville or Sevierville. And I swear to God, I'm in a Walmart. Okay, so we need to set the painting here. We're in Walmart. You got to manage your expectations at that point. And I look at the lady and I go, "How do they pronounce this town?" She goes, "Are you from the north or the south?" I go, "What the hell does that have to do with it?" She says, "A lot." I said, "Well, I guess I'm from Indiana." She says, "You're a northerner." I said, "Okay." She says, "You pronounce it Sevierville." I said, "She says, if you're from the south, you pronounce it Sevierville." I looked there and I said, "What the hell does that make any difference to?" She says, "A lot if you live here." And that's kind of what it is when I was, I'll never forget the story that's always been told was, there's this gentleman who was leading a tour through the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and he asked everybody where they're staying, and they said, "Well, we're staying in England and London." He looks up and says, "Well, the only good thing to come out of London or out of England is the road back to Scotland." And I'll never forget that. And there's a very deep thing. Scotland's been trying to succeed the crown and become its own state, and it's never happened. They don't have the monetary value to do it. But, there's a lot. That's a very touchy subject. And when you're in a pub, that's one of the things you avoid, along with religion. My family, the McLarens, they have a lot to do with Episcopal religion and so forth, and we always try to maintain getting away from that. But anyway, those are stories that come back to mind, so I had to bring those up. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so the Loftus family, once they took... I kind of lost my place here.
That's okay. I'm sorry. I got it way off,
We took
people.
Too much of a tangent here.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
the hook and crook, though, that's interesting. And that's the kind of things that were in the book, and I'll find the book for you here shortly. It's neat because I tell you what, a lot of those are in there. People don't realize that goes back to a real thing, and I could see this, for the firewood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. Everything has an origin story.
Sure.
And I just find it interesting where things come from, their origination. I'm kind of a minor philologist,
Yes.
Linguistic origins.
Yes.
You can really trace where somebody's lineage is coming from by the phrases they use, the language that they use in their everyday, and sort of the quips that come into their vernacular.
Yeah,
you can see where their lignage lies.
So you're starting to get my area of intelligence, because that's things that are studied, because it's easy to pick out a person's dialect and their, and that shows certainly from their background, maybe their heritage. It has a lot there.
Yeah.
I always tell everybody I have the best team on Spirit you could possibly ask for. I mean, I've got people that are very skilled in every bit of the organization, whether it be technical, research, whatever. I got the best out there. So I'll tell you what, it makes a difference. It really does. And having that passion to go forth and to study those areas makes a difference. That's where it's at. A lot of teams don't have that. When they're formed in a garage, everybody always asks me, will you comment on how good is this team? I don't talk about other teams. The one thing I will say is experience you cannot beat. And that makes a difference. So I'm sorry. Let's get back on subject again. We'll try this one more time.
Yeah, we'll try one more time.
Yeah,
Here we go.
Next paragraph we'll venture off.
Because my brain's going off in another tangent.
That's
but we
all right.
won't go there. Okay.
All right.
So 1666, Nicholas Loftus' son, Henry, moves into the hall, and thereafter it's been Loftus Hall, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the Loftus family rose in peerage over the following centuries. In 1800, the owner of the hall at that time, Charles Loftus, or Baron Loftus, was created the Marquis of Ely. Mm-hmm. It was his descendant, John Loftus, the fourth Marquis of Ely, who between 1872 and 1884, he refurbishes the old hall and then uses the existing structure, resulting in the present-day house. So what you see today is not the house that we're going to talk about in our story.
Real quickly, and it's not a tangent, but I ask a question, which is kind of a tangent. Because this one you maybe the Marquis, the word Marquis, that's again French.
That's
I
French.
know during the Jacobite War. Now I'm going back into Scotland, which is about the same period here. The French had an insurgence there, and I kind of wonder if that influence isn't there at that point in time.
I think that tangent on
Yes.
The Marquis, the Viscount, the Dukes, the Earls. I think that all originates from William the Conqueror in 1066 when he came over, because William the Conqueror, Henry, Richard the Lionheart, they all ruled England. They ruled Brittany, Normandy, Aquitaine.
Sure.
Those are all on the French, on the European mainland in modern day France.
Do you think some of it goes back to the Roman occupation?
No, I think it's definitely from Gaul and from Normandy. You've got that French influence because they were French kings first and foremost, and then they ruled England as well. It wasn't until Richard the Lionheart with Philip and King John, when King John lost almost all of Brittany, Aquitaine, and Normandy to Philip, that France really became its own kingship, and the King of England only really ruled England, Scotland, and Ireland, tried to get as much of Ireland as they could.
Yes.
So I think that's where these marquises and viscounts,
that would make sense.
That comes from the French side.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that because I wondered, and that makes sense. Okay, I hadn't thought about that. I was going back too far. I was going back to the Roman period and Britannia, and I was trying to think that through. So that makes more sense. That really does. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's why we have that leakage over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were at least 3 structures on this site. So we don't know how much of Redmond Hall and Houseland, right? Raymond LeGros Houseland.
Yeah.
With the Redmond family's Loftus Hall. How much of that was all the same, or if they just completely tore down and rebuilt, we don't know.
Yeah.
But looking at Loftus Hall now, I really think that part of the original Redmond Hall was incorporated into the current day Loftus Hall, because it's really weird how you go into a main entrance and there's this whole foyer with a fireplace, and then you've got your drawing rooms, your card rooms off to the side there.
Sure.
Then you go back behind the fireplace through this door, and then there's the grand staircase is there. It's almost like it's a second edition in.
Wow.
It's kind of weird. It's almost like they left the original vestibule.
Yeah, and you can when you
and
go
then
through there, you can
did
see
another entry.
Wow.
Yeah,
you can see whether additions are made generally.
Yeah, and this is really sort of a warren of rooms and hallways, which isn't unusual for English manor houses and castles and whatnot.
Yeah.
To have a warren of rooms, but this is even more maze-like.
Yes.
It doesn't really set a definitive hallway with rooms off like you would see in a normal manor house.
I wonder if this goes back to the French portion, because most French architecture was more maze-like.
It does look a lot like French, but I think that it's mostly because they were adding and replacing and repairing in different stages and phases, is what I think.
That makes sense, too.
Winston House.
What? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Our house is. Yeah, we don't want to talk
Winston
about that.
House.
Yeah, Winston. Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No, Winchester.
I was going to say
I knew where you were going. Yeah,
I thought you meant Winchester.
Yeah,
But I
Winchester.
wasn't sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. Now that one's the king of the. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no,
But
that
the description,
doesn't
that's
hold
what it reminds
candle
me
to
of.
anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least those were functional in Loftus Hall. I mean, Winchester, we were just doing it to do it, to keep the spirits from getting to Sarah Winchester.
Yeah, Loftus is definitely very functional. It's very unique, though. I don't know that I've seen another manor house quite like this one.
Yeah.
It's really quite unique. So between the 1872 and 1884, John Henry Wellington Graham Loftus, the fourth Marquis of Ely, under his mother, Lady Jane Hope Loftus, she was a lady in waiting to Queen Victoria.
Oh.
Okay, so he undertook an extensive rebuild of the entire mansion, adding the grand staircase, which we mentioned. There's a mosaic tile floor. There's an elaborate parquet flooring. They had flushing toilets, blown air heating, and I'm not going to go out on another tangent right there like I could. But the ideas for this restoration come from the Osborne House.
Queen's summer residence.
The Queen's summer residence on the Isle of Wight. Now, it is supposed that he undertook these renovations because he was trying to get Queen Victoria to come stay at the house.
I mean, honestly, every lady of waiting in every part of the court was supposed to have the residence available to the Queen or King.
Precisely.
Should it be necessary.
Right.
So a lot of times the Crown helped fund some of the renovations
not
as
in
well.
this case.
No, not in all cases, but yes.
Right, because what the Marquis wanted was he wanted to marry Victoria's daughter. There was one of her daughters that he was wanting to marry.
A plotted hand, yes.
So he was trying to make himself look impressive enough to win her hand in marriage. However, the Queen never did visit. And the fourth Marquis died without getting married, without issue.
Oh.
So his cousin eventually ended up with the place. But because of the high debt that that the estate was under because of renovations, he wasn't going to put up with it. So he put it on the market, and he classed it as a 3-story non-basement mansion, 9 bays to the front with a balustraded parapet.
You want to explain what that is? I know what it is, but you want to explain?
It's basically like a balcony type situation.
It's an overhang balcony.
Right.
Yeah. It's overhang balcony.
Kind of like Romeo and Juliet.
Exactly. Yeah.
In 1917, Loftus Hall, so this is while the cousins got it on the market.
Okay.
1917, Loftus Hall is bought by the Sisters of Providence, who turned it into a convent and a school for young girls interested in joining the order. Now, I've got notes spread all over the place because the more research I did, the more interesting things I found. There is...
I want to say this as a compliment. A sign of a cluttered desk is a sign of a genius mind. Just saying that.
Oh, my.
It is, huh?
Yeah, because mine stays cluttered. Except for when you put things on the leather. We don't put anything on the blot because the leather blot is needs to be very clear. You don't want any indentations or marks on it when you write.
I'm
Just saying.
out my own desk if somebody complains about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have got notes and stuff all over the place here for this. Because I just kept finding other stuff and stuff that didn't
That's
fit.
a great thing about research. I never got a chance really to do it other when I was first starting out. But that's a great thing. One leads to another leads to another. It's great.
It's so fun. So There is a documentary that I'll talk about later, but in that he says that the Benedictine nuns were the first ones to take residence, and they only stayed there 2 years before leaving. And that the Rosminian nuns came in, and they're the ones that established the school for the girls, and they were there for 40 years. Okay. So it's possible that we've got two separate orders there. Of nuns coming in. And then, so in 1983, it was purchased by Kay and Michael Devereaux, who opened it as Loftus Hall Hotel. Okay. And this operated until its closure in the late 90s. Michael actually died in the hall.
Really?
He died in the hall in the tapestry room, which we'll get to later.
Because I want to know how he died in a tapestry. This got me.
Well, it was turned, the tapestry room had been turned into the bar of the hotel. And he was sitting on the edge of the bar and evidently had a heart attack and died.
Slumped over.
It's not a bad way to go, though, all in all. Yeah.
So Kay tried to keep the hotel up and running, but she struggled for several years. Until one night, legend has it, that she took off in the middle of the night without explanation, leaving everything behind. And when asked, she said, "The house told me to leave."
Oh, there you go.
That's the story. Okay.
Get out.
Yeah, get out.
So the property was left vacant for a little while, occupied illicitly for nearly a decade. People were conducting satanic rituals in there,
God. Yeah, the usual kind of thing.
Exactly. Meetings and whatnot.
Drags in those very interesting people.
As people do, yes.
Yeah.
But in 2011, the Quigley family bought it and opened it up for ghost tours and such, and they were going to restore it. Now, I had heard that the Quigley brothers, Aiden is one of them, and I don't remember the other brother's name, were contractors. So they kind of knew what they were doing.
They knew what they're getting into. Yeah.
Right. But it became too much of a cost. They weren't able to do it.
Wow.
And he finally sold it again in 2021 to a developer.
Yes.
Now, I went online, and this developer is turning this place into a high-end luxury resort hotel.
Wow.
I know, Heather. That look says it all to me, too.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'll never be able to afford to get in there now.
No, but I tell you what,
And how much are they going to destroy? I hope they don't destroy this. I mean,
that's the problem.
Beautiful. Now, I did do Google Earth to try to find out, and it is still under construction.
Yeah.
They were hoping to open, but now they're not. And now there is actually rumor that they're trying to sell it to a different development company.
Wow.
So are they having paranormal issues?
Yeah, that could be interesting.
Or did they just run out of
money? They have
money?
money issues, one of the two.
It does look like they have really restored the outside, and it's now nice and gleaming and white.
Yeah.
And I think that the actual hotel part is being constructed adjacent to Loftus Hall.
They haven't touched the original structure, possibly.
I think that they're going to restore the original as is, keep it nice, and then put the modern facilities and amenities attached to it off to the side. Okay. I hope that's what it looks like. Sense. So we'll have to see. Okay. So where in all of our ramblings are we going here? Where in this timeline does this story for our haunting begin?
Yeah.
So we have to go back to the mid-1700s.
All right.
And the story has several different versions. As we know, all stories do, as we discussed earlier with the game of telephone, through the generations. Sure. Okay.
Passed down and passed down.
Right. So, Anne Loftus is daughter, and maybe the only child, of Viscount Loftus. She marries Charles Tottenham.
Okay.
In order for Charles to become Lord of the Manor of Loftus Hall, he must take his wife's name of Loftus.
Really?
So he had to become
I see that. That's
Charles
happened, yes.
Tottenham Loftus, or Charles Loftus Tottenham, I think. Charles Loftus Tottenham. Which he does.
Yes.
They have 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls, one of which is named Anne after her mother. This Anne, the daughter, is born 1744. Mm-hmm. Mother Anne dies 1768. Mm-hmm. There's another daughter, Elizabeth, and she is born after Anne.
Okay.
So Anne is not the youngest daughter, as is sometimes stated.
Yes.
Elizabeth is the youngest daughter by about 5 years, if I remember correctly, by looking on Ancestry.com. Mm-hmm. And I will say, Most of the people that have told the story prior to did not have access to Ancestry.com, so
Yes.
did not see birth dates and names
Yeah.
and lineages. I had access to that. It's very helpful. So, Mother Ann dies. Charles remarries, and he is living in Loftus Hall with his second wife and his daughter Anne, who at the time of our story is 21 and unmarried. In this day and age, she would be considered a spinster.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Now, whether Sister Elizabeth is still in the house or not, she's about 15 or 16 at this time, so she could have been married off at 16, or she could be still home. We don't know. Yeah. We also don't know if Charles and Anne, daughter Anne, and the second wife were visiting Loftus Hall for like a summer break or a winter break or whatever.
Usually like a summer house.
Maybe this wasn't their permanent residence.
Sure.
But the story is that Anne, the daughter, her father Charles, and her stepmother are in residence. Whether they have a house party or not, we don't know.
Yeah.
So, it was a dark and stormy night, 1765. A ship is run aground on the shore. A dark, mysterious stranger makes his way, by horse, up the gravel drive to a warm, inviting manor house. He is welcomed by Charles Tottenham Loftus to the comfort of the hall for the night. Or the week. He is given food, shelter, companionship.
Sure.
During that evening, one evening or many, a game of cards is being had.
Oh, I think I know the story. Go ahead.
And the dark stranger is winning every round.
Yeah.
During a game, Loftus, in anger, throws his cards on the table, knocking a card to the floor. Anne bent to retrieve the card and noticed the stranger had a cloven hoof.
Oof. Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah, that's good.
They confront the stranger, who laughs a hearty, evil laugh, declares himself the devil, and then in a burst of flame and smoke, he shoots up through the ceiling, through the roof of the mansion, never to be seen again. Anne, in a state of shock, becomes mentally unstable, and her family, ashamed of what she has become, lock her away in her favorite room, the tapestry room, where she refuses to eat or drink and simply stays curled up in a chair staring into the fire until she dies. It is said that when she dies, they are unable to lay her out flat as her muscles have seized, and she was said to have been buried in that upright position.
Wow.
Alternate versions of the story
Yeah.
are the stranger was there for a week or more, during which time he and Anne became close.
Oh, yeah. Very close.
Yeah. And after the fiery scene at the card table, one version of this has Anne dropping a ring off of her finger, and it rolls under the table, so she's picking up the ring. When she found out what he was, she became mad. And still another adds that after the stranger departs, it is found that Anne is with child.
Oh,
And
wow.
that this is why she is locked up, because
That's unacceptable.
that's
Yeah.
unacceptable, right? And there are accounts that she had the child, but it was buried up in the walls of the tapestry room.
Oh.
And a story is that the workmen found an infant skeleton in the walls during the renovations. Now, others say a skeleton. It doesn't say whether it was an adult or an infant.
Sure.
So, there
It
are
was not
different
unusual for
versions of the
castles to
stations.
have skeletons, yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have heard that story. Yes.
You know, it's funny,
Skeleton
but-
buried in the wall.
You know, in Celtic and Irish lore, the devil appears many times. There's another castle in Scotland.
So, there are actually 3 areas, and they call
Yes.
it the Triangle in Ireland.
Okay.
The, I can't remember the name of it. The Dublin Triangle.
Devil and Trial. Yeah, I've heard of it. yes.
Because Loftus Hall, like I said, is on the
Yep.
peninsula. And then up in Dublin, you have the Hellfire Club.
Yep.
And you have Castle House Castle.
Yep.
This same story is said to have occurred at all 3 of these locations. Now, whether is occurred separately at each one,
Yes.
or whether it's the same story and the location changes, is open for debate.
Yes.
However, the other thing is that one of the Loftus sons, Anne's brother,
Yes.
was a member of the Hellfire Club
Oh, there you go.
and invited the devil in, so that's why the devil ended up at Loftus Hall.
I didn't get to go through the tunnels the last 2 times I've been there, but I want to go through them. You have to hit. There's certain days they have tours through them.
The tunnels, the Draco tunnels?
No, the Hellfire tunnels.
No, the Hellfire tunnels.
Yeah. The Draco tunnels, it's same way. They all have different.
Yeah.
You know, and when I got there, it's like I told all the brothers, I said, there's like 600 things I want to see. Can we make this work? And one of them looks at me and goes, lad, you want to eat? I go, yes. And he says, well, that probably isn't going to work. He said, we'll get what we can.
One or the other.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see Rosalind Chapel, the Templars. But here's the thing. There's another story about another Scottish castle, and dear God, I can't remember it off the top of my head. But the devil comes to play a game of poker.
Yes.
You remember that story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this story is prevalent all over the UK.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen here. It has happened in multiple locations.
I'm sure
this
Wales
same
and
story.
whatnot. Yes.
Yeah, the same story.
If we research it further, we probably will find out it reappears many times.
Many times. Yep, it does.
And so, but that's the part of interest in this whole thing. I mean, really, that's what makes it more and more interesting to think about.
Yeah. So, what are the histories that back up this claim? Do we have the devil visiting Loftus Hall? Is it infested? Maybe, maybe not.
Yes.
Okay. So, there are claims that Loftus Hall started having poltergeist activity after this fiery encounter. Mm-hmm. So much so that there is a claim that the Protestant Loftus family, even turned to the Catholic Church in desperation, and that a Father Thomas Broders actually came and performed a successful cleansing. In fact, it is reported on his gravestone, the inscription reads, "Here lies the body of Thomas Broders, who did good and prayed for all, and who banished the devil from Loftus Hall."
Wow.
Okay, wait. Don't get too excited.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Don't get too excited. And this is where I turned to Charles and said, why? Why? Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to move over to my notes and move away from the script, so I'm going to get lost in the script here a second. In the docudrama from 1993 by Richard Whalen, it's called The Legend of Loftus Hall.
Yes.
And I sat through it, and I wish I hadn't, but then again, I'm glad I did.
Wow, yeah.
Is it that bad?
Yeah.
A little long,
Although the cool thing is, it was recorded on site at Loftus Hall.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Okay.
So watch it, sit through it. It's kind of rough, but anyway.
But you get to see.
The card room where the incident takes place and the devil disappears, that is actually the tapestry room. I can see the wallpaper from the tapestry. So that's a tapestry room. And then it is used again as the tapestry room, when in actuality, the card room where the incident happened is like 2 rooms up at the front of the house where the card room is. And the tapestry room, you go through 2 other rooms, linked 2 other rooms to the tapestry room. So it's not the same room.
Yes.
But they use the same room in the documentary. But anyway, the room where they're playing the cards and room where she's sitting in the big bay window is the tapestry room. And so I got to see it in its glory from 93,
This also brings up another point. The devil tends to like card games.
Right.
Just saying, yeah.
Yeah, card games and fiddles, right?
Fiddles, yeah, that's right.
Card games and fiddles. So in this, Richard Whalen, he puts Mother Anne as the mother in the story. We already know she's died.
Yeah.
He puts Anne as having died and Father Broders coming to exorcise Anne's ghost.
Okay.
Anne died in 1775.
Wow.
10 years after the incident is supposed to take place in 1776. She dies in 1775.
Yes.
Father Broders, otherwise known as Canon Broders, because
Yes.
Canon is priest or father in Ireland. He dies in 1773.
Wow.
He cannot exorcise Anne's ghost
No.
because she's not dead
No,
yet.
yeah, that's right.
She's not dead
Funny
yet.
how those things come together, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's our poof up in smoke.
Yep,
that did not happen. Father Broders did not exorcise Anne's spirit from Loftus Hall. And it is said, I'm going to so go off script here because I am getting excited about this. So it was also said that he banished the devil to the tapestry room.
Okay.
Why would he banish the devil to the very room that Anne is ensconced in?
Yeah.
That
doesn't make a lot of sense,
no.
does it? No, certainly not.
And in addition to what his tomb supposedly says, his chalice has still been kept to this day in his home parish of Ramsgrange.
Really?
And I actually found an article from 2011 of an Irish newspaper where Father Broders' chalice was stolen from the church.
Wow.
And they were able to get it back.
Oh.
Wow.
So Father Broders existed. He was alive. He was
we
very well.
We can document that, yeah.
We can document. We can find
we
his
can document
grave.
the chalice.
We can find it. But we cannot document the inscription
Well, you got to remember, too, at that point in time, Catholicism, if you were having an exorcism, it wasn't published.
This is we're going to talk about that, and I don't know if I put it, but again, like I have so many notes that I didn't put this in the script.
Please,
but,
share them.
There is also rumor made that the bishop sent a letter to Father Broders asking him to go to the hall because they were having issues. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, is it possible that he could have been called to exorcise Anne?
Well,
she's still alive. They're having poltergeist activity. They're having poltergeist activity.
Most people assume that they've already passed, but this may not be the... She may be possessed at the time.
She may... Okay, so here is where we go.
Okay.
We're going to take a little mini tangent, but it's relative. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Protestants and Catholics.
Okay.
They did not like each other after Henry VIII's Reformation, right? Okay, after the Reformation in the 1500s, and Henry VIII abolishes Catholicism, right? It's all Protestants and everything.
Yes.
The Protestants hate the Catholics.
Oh,
you would not ask the Catholics for anything, okay? Why is a Protestant family calling on the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
We've got a big problem.
Because they're desperate.
Because they're desperate.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is here, Catholics believe in purgatory.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
If you're stuck in purgatory, your family is paying the church for prayers and masses said for you to
keep those people
to repent and penance so you can make your way to heaven.
Yes.
Protestants don't believe in purgatory. So no spirit is
no, they believe in judgment day and that's it. Yes.
You either go to heaven or you go to hell.
Yeah. No in-betweens.
No in-betweens. And Protestants also believe, Catholics believe you can pray to angels and angels will take your prayers to heaven, right? Mm-hmm. They're the go-between.
Yes.
Protestants don't believe.
You either pray to God or not at all.
Right. And you don't even need to because everything you need is in the Bible. It's there for you. You don't have to have anybody intercede on your behalf. Yeah. Okay? So while they believe angels exist, and this is so much more complicated than I'm going to go into right now, but angels exist, but there's no reason for them to come down and commune with you or to talk to you, so they're not going to.
Yes.
So the only spirits that would exist would be angels or demons.
Exactly.
And if the angels don't need to have anything to do with you, the only spirit that you're going to have is going to be a demon.
And this is why not only Protestant, but Baptist churches and stuff will tell you that if you're communicating with a ghost, it's not a ghost, it's a demon.
Right.
And this is one of the very reasons
and
why.
This is the evolution of that belief from the Reformation. So, but then there's also another little section over there that the Protestants at this point were like, well, shoot. Okay, if we don't have any signs of spirituality, how do we prove God's existence? Okay, well, wait a second. So now we have to intercede. Maybe something good is coming. So let's try and boost up the spiritual element so we can prove the existence of God.
Sure.
Okay.
This is before Luther and everything else. So
this is after Luther.
Oh, after Luther. Okay.
Yeah, because Luther was in the 1500s.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're in 1770s.
So we're to the point.
1800s.
Yes.
Okay. It's mid 1770s. So the fact that we've got Protestants going to Catholics says a lot. It says that they thought they had a demon. Yes. They thought they had a possession. Now, whether what happened to Anne, we don't know. But if they've got poltergeist activity happening because Anne has gone mentally unstable for some situation, maybe that this stranger did come. Maybe he was a flesh and blood person. Yeah. Maybe they had a liaison and he left. Or maybe he was Catholic. Yeah. Maybe he wasn't of the gentry. Maybe her family didn't want him around. Maybe she did get with child. Or maybe he was sent away. Okay, because part of the legend,
it's all a possibility.
Part of the legend says that you can hear horse hoofs around the outside of Loftus Hall, and that Anne is inside the Loftus Hall. Wow. Maybe they can't get to each other.
That could be
right. Okay,
proverbial barrier. Yeah.
Right. So we've got different things going on. So maybe Anne has gone into a catatonic state. Maybe she is in this tapestry room, going mentally insane for whatever reason. Maybe she's had a child. Maybe the child died in childbirth.
Yeah.
Anything. Maybe she has gone to a mental state where now she is creating poltergeist activity. The Protestants who don't believe in anything but a demon or the devil himself has come to Loftus Hall.
It's a demon.
Yeah.
Right? It's a demon. So they call in the church to help exorcise Anne.
Sure.
okay, to get rid of that.
That would fit
And
the
you know,
timeline of that.
It would fit the
Yeah, it
timeline
would, it
because
would, yeah.
Father Broders comes in. Maybe he's able to do a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe he can't do anything at all, and they just say that he could so that they
Yeah.
can keep it quiet.
Well, you know,
And she passes away
And-
not long after.
Right.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
long after. I mean, we got
Very true.
2 years after Father Broders dies. Anne dies. And maybe they would rather have the devil come to their house than have a
A stain
daughter
on
yeah,
who was
out of wedlock.
out of
yeah.
wedlock,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's so many
Never
more
really-
interesting
Well, you
paths
know,
to this story.
when I was studying theology, one thing I always said was, is a lot of people don't agree with the Catholic Church. And, you know, I got a lot of Catholic friends, and I'll tell you, I have some differences. But they said, you know, what happens when you don't agree with the Catholic Church? And I said, what? They said, you become Methodist, Lutheran, or Presbyterian. Yeah, that was always the standing joke because
but it all evolves from the same
yeah,
stuff,
it does. And
know?
you know, my aunt before she passed, I remember one time we were in a hospital with a relative who was bad off, and I said something about the chapel. I said, "Well, I think it's a Catholic chapel," and she said, "Well, honey, they're all dedicated to the same guy. I mean, it
That's
doesn't really
right.
matter." And I mean, you know, I never thought of it that way,
That's
but it's
right.
true.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot there, but you know, Catholicism is certainly well attached with any thought of exorcism, you know, clearing an infestation.
Right.
That is their
And-
their
And
avenue.
like you said, you don't just go to any haunting for an
Exactly,
exorcism. It
exactly.
has to be really documented. It has to be really
Yes.
deemed
There's a procedure.
valuable. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
the fact that Father Broders, you know, and he was extremely well loved, so much so
Yep.
that the Catholics and the Protestants, when he died, fought over who would have his body in their burial site.
Wow.
They both wanted him. So that he must have done something
There was something
of
there
value.
that, yeah.
His chalice was saved for over, to this day,
Yeah.
200 some years later, they still
Obviously,
have his
there
chalice.
was, yeah.
They went and got it back.
Something
after
something
it was
has
stolen.
happened,
Well,
right?
and I'll tell you,
So he was actually buried in a mixed cemetery of Catholics and Protestants.
wow.
So they
Ah,
could
that
both
was
have
their
him,
divider line.
That, yeah, so they could both have him in their
You
grave.
know, there's a great movie. Of course, I'm a John Wayne fan, but if you watch The Quiet Man, that's always something around. There's two movies I always recommend. One is The Quiet Man around St. Patrick's Day, and the other one is, help me out here, honey. What's the one with Sean Connery and
Darby O'Gill and
the little people. Oh, yeah, you got to see Darby O'Gill and the little people. But I mean, there's a lot of this in here. In The Quiet Man, there's a bunch of Presbyterian, or there's a bunch of Catholics, and they're standing there, and the Presbyterian minister may be removed, and one of them says, "Cover your collar," and he says, "You know, cheer when they come by." He says, "Why?" He says, "Yeah, we kind of work together," and that's it shows that they kind of work together when they needed help. You know, I think that's a really good example of this. You know, it's kind of funny because they put scarves around their collars so they can't be seen. They look like a good Presbyterian, and you know, it's just kind of funny, but that worked back then. A lot of times it was about what the individual needed to help them and not about anything else.
Another clue here
Mm-hmm.
is there were a lot of Tottens that became religious after this.
Oh, I bet.
There are
yeah.
a lot of reverends, and that's isn't unheard of
Well, we
because
always say
second
about,
sons and third sons would end
yeah.
up in the religious sector
Sure.
anyway. But a
Well, what do we
reverend,
always say about skeptics? You'll never get a skeptic to believe until they witness something.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So there's a Reverend George Reed,
Mm-hmm.
and he is our first written account of the tale.
Okay.
So claims are that during the 1880s renovation that the skeleton was found, like I said, right in the room, in the
Yes.
tapestry room.
Yes.
This room during that renovation was actually expanded into a larger room. And that's what we see today. And that's what is shown in that documentary.
Yes.
So that tapestry room wasn't always that large. I think it was
Yes.
cordoned off into two rooms.
Mm-hmm.
But that room was turned into a billiards room at one point during the time of the story that I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
This tale was heard from Reverend Robert Tottenham.
Okay.
Told Reverend George Reed that there were issues going on at the hall.
Okay.
These guys are contemporary with the time that the renovations are happening.
Yes.
So they're living the same time the renovations are happening, which is 100 years after our story takes place, 120 years, okay? But the first telling is reported that Loftus's mother, the lady in waiting to Queen Victoria, told the story to Queen Victoria. of the devil coming to Loftus Hall.
Yes.
And Queen Victoria says, well, I don't believe in spirits. Don't tell me. But go tell Albert because he believes in this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So that is the first mention of a story being told. But the first written story was by this Reverend George Reed.
Wow.
And supposedly there was a written account in the Whitehall Review from September 28th, 1882, which, again, takes place during the time of renovations. I could not access that, but it is an overseas paper, and the Ancestry.com and our overseas, I was having difficulty getting into that.
Okay.
And with newspapers.com, I couldn't get into it. So I didn't find it. But the funny thing about this, Chief, you gave me this book.
Sure.
Okay. The day that we decided to try and do an Irish story for the March podcast and said, let's look through this. I hadn't opened the book yet. It was in my car. I was flipping through podcasts trying to figure out what we were going to do, trying to find something in Blarney Castle.
Sure.
And I really can't find ghost stories connected to Blarney. There's legends, but I can't find ghost stories. So I said, well, Loftus Hall, let me look that up. So I'm listening to podcasts on it, and they mention that Reverend Reed's account is been published in True Irish Ghost Stories. And I went, oh man, synchronicity, because that is the exact book that is in my car waiting for me to flip through it. So the account of this is in this book, and I've got it here. And I'm going to read real quick from it.
Oh, please.
It says, much mystery has involved the story at this present point, and in truth, the matter was left in much silence and obscurity. That, but for the facts of her who was the chief sufferer in it through several generations, nothing now can be known. In fact, I believe, which was not unnatural under the circumstances, that this lonely girl formed a strong attachment to the gallant youth chance had brought to her door, which was warmly returned. The father was in his stern nature an obdurate, and the wife no solace to her as she was a stepmother. It is only an instance of the refrain of the old ballad. He loved and he rode away. He had youth and friends and stirring scenes, and soon forgot his passing attachment. Poor Anne's reason gave way.
Wow.
Right? So
connecting the points,
Connecting the points. So it's just shortly after the Marquis dies and the cousin gets the house, and we had sold it to the nuns and whatnot, is when this book was first published.
Yes.
It was first published 1926.
Okay.
So the nuns have residence of the house at this point.
Yeah. And by the way, how I come in possession of that book, one of the guys from, you can leave those in, I don't mind. I might try to look through some stuff.
Okay.
The guys that come over from England, from Tower Lodge, brought me that book. They brought me several on the second trip because they knew that after the first trip, they understood this is my thing, and they started finding anything ghost related, and that was how I got that book.
Yeah. So, and in this book, Father.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
He's Reverend because he's
Reverend,
Protestant.
Yeah, it's Protestant. Yeah.
He also has the lineage wrong, the different Annes and whatnot in his story. By this point, that's where the lineage has broken down, and it's wrong in this story. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of passages I want to read here because it tells what our ghost claims are.
Okay.
And this is happening from the early 1800s through the time of the renovations.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go here just a quick second.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Last century. So things are happening constantly. Okay. Years afterward, I was brought by my father with the rest of the family to the hall for the summer bathing. Attracted by the quaint look of the tapestry room, I at once chose it for my bedroom, being utterly ignorant to the stories connected with it. For some little time, nothing out of the way happened. One night, however, I sat up much later than usual to finish an article in a magazine I was reading. I was just about to get into bed, and happened to glance toward my door. To my great surprise, I saw it open quickly and noiselessly, and as quickly and noiselessly shut again, while the tall figure of a lady in a stiff dress passed slowly through the room to one of the curious closets already mentioned, which isn't mentioned, but anyway, which was in the opposite corner. I rubbed my eyes. Every possible explanation but the true one occurred to my mind, for the idea of a ghost did not, for a moment, enter my head. Being Protestant, he wouldn't believe in ghosts. I quickly reasoned myself into a sound sleep and forgot the matter. The next night, I again sat up late in my bedroom, preparing a gun and ammunition to go on the shoot seabirds on the hunt the next morning, when the door again opened and shut in the same noiseless manner. The same tall lady proceeded to cross the room quietly and deliberately as before towards the closet. I instantly rushed at her and threw my right arm around her, exclaiming, "Ha, I have you now." To my utter astonishment, my arm passed through her and came with a thud against the bedpost.
Wow.
At which spot she was then. The figure quickened its pace, and as it passed, the skirt of its dress lapped against the curtain, and I marked the distinct pattern of a stiff brocade silk.
Wow.
Okay, and this whole story has several accounts from people who have been at the house who have witnessed the same thing. Okay, there was even a tutor, Reverend Charles Dale. He had come to the hall because he was going to be tutoring one of the marquises. And this was in the early 1950s, or 1850s. I hate getting the dates wrong. 1850. And he was put up in the tapestry room. And he only stayed for 3 days.
That should say something.
Yes.
No.
Yes. And he only stayed for 3 days. In the autumn of 1868, this guy, Reverend Reed, was again going to Loftus Hall. And he found the closet into which the poor lady was vanished had been taken away. The room enlarged, and 2 additional windows were put in. The old tapestry room had gone, and the billiard table occupied the site where Anne's bed was.
Wow.
So he took the housekeeper aside, and he says, what's going on? And how does Miss Tottenham feel about these changes in her apartment? She looked quite frightened and most anxious to avoid the question, but at length hurriedly replied, "Oh, Master George, don't talk about her. Last night she made a terrible noise, knocking the billiard balls all about." She was not, she was still
happy.
Oh, yeah.
She was not happy, and she was still active in the house.
Oh, yeah.
She's still there in the house. So, like I said, that came out in 1926. But those stories were first-hand accounts from people.
Sure.
I mean, Reverend George Reed witnessed that information. That cord is not going to stay
No,
put.
I know. I'm sorry,
just
folks.
leave
That
it where it
sounds
is.
cord keeps dropping. Yeah.
Just leave it.
Yeah, it's better to leave it in position. Okay.
So, it's not only first-hand from Reverend Reed, but it's second-hand from
Collaborating stories
right,
here. Yeah.
right, that have been told to Reverend Reed from people who
people who work
experienced it.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
and there was one incident where one of the valets, when he got to the hall, all the
Yes.
rooms were empty, and the housekeeper's like, "Well, you're going to be in the tapestry room." He goes, "No, I'm not. I will leave my Lord's service before I sleep in that room."
Yeah.
And so Reverend Reed overheard it, and he goes, "What's going on? Tell me, because I know something about this room."
Yes.
And so the valet is like,
Apparently
blah, blah, blah,
so
blah.
did he.
And
Yeah.
Reed goes, "Yes, exactly. That's happened before,
Well, yeah. I mean, and certainly, let's face it, and some people may disagree with this, the bed or the seat of ghost stories really comes out of England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland. I mean, okay, there's some differences there, but I mean, how many places are...
Our modern day
Yes.
comes from there.
Yeah.
I mean, but Europe has its own folklore
It
religions. But it's kind of...
It's different than
It's
here.
different, but it's because it's cultural representations of how
Exactly.
you're seeing the phenomenon and why that phenomenon is existing.
Exactly.
Like when we discussed the jinn in Middle Eastern,
Yes.
we didn't think ghost stories happen there, but they do.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
just a different ilk, because it has a different background
Exactly.
basis, a different cultural
Exactly.
uniqueness to them. Right.
And I think that's, again, that puts some of the spin on the folklore from where it comes from.
Yes. Yes,
You know,
precisely.
I mean, one of my earliest of Irish folklore, again, goes back to Darby O'Gill and the Little People. It's one of the greatest, Walt Disney movies made for, and, of course, Sean Connery looks like a young man, but, I mean, everybody needs to watch that. I mean, it's a neat thing, even for adults, to see all the legends come to life, including the banshee. I mean, I've got a little image of a banshee on the bookshelves up here, but that all came to light in this movie, and you start seeing that because a lot of people didn't travel a lot abroad back then, mostly domestic. I mean, we're talking 40s and 50s. Nowadays, it's nothing unusual, and everybody always asks me, "Well, you were over there. Why didn't you go to Ireland?" Jesus Christ, man, there's so much to see, and you pick the places close as you can. You always say, "Well, I'll get that one next time."
Right.
And
if there's a next time.
If there's a next time.
But like you said, with churches, it doesn't matter
Yes.
what the denomination is. It's all going to the same God, right?
Exactly.
So what does it matter what the cultural or origination of the story is? It's all the same paranormal phenomenon happening.
It is.
Right?
It is.
So
It's
now
still a ghost.
it's still
Still a ghost. Yeah.
right. So now the nuns have Loftus Hall.
Okay.
And legend says that 4 nuns have died while on property,
Really?
which is not unheard of.
Well, no. I mean, that
Depending on
happens.
their
Yeah.
age,
And they had it for
and
40
health.
years,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, not unusual. Yeah.
2 drowned in the sea,
Okay.
which if you look at the rocky,
Yeah.
that's
One step
kind
the
of
wrong way
one
and-
step on the slippery rocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a rough and treacherous stretch. There's a reason there's a lighthouse there. And
Oh,
there
very
wasn't a
so,
lighthouse
yeah.
for 100 years. There was a span of 100 years time where there wasn't a lighthouse. And the amount of shipwrecks was unheard
Oh,
of.
yeah, I bet.
So that's why the Redmonds put, and I think it might have been Raymond LeGros who built the current lighthouse.
Yes.
One fell down the grand staircase, and one fell down the back stairwell. Now, some stories have both nuns falling down the back stairwell. The grand staircase. This
Okay.
is an amazing piece
Oh, I bet.
of woodwork. I mean, I think took 9 years to build and 3 years to install.
Yes.
Now, I could be wrong on that because there's also the mosaic tile floor in the front foyer, and there's a whole
Well, I
legend
bet that's
surrounding
beautiful
that.
as well. Yeah.
2 Italian stone workers came and laid that, and the story is that took 9 years to lay, and that after they laid it, the Marquis chopped off their hands so they would never be able to
Wow.
recreate the design again. That's legend. I don't know if it actually happened.
Talk about being too good at your trade.
Right. But the nuns took such good care of this staircase when they had it that, they waxed it every day. Waxed it and polished it and dusted it and waxed it and waxed it. So when Loftus became a ruin and the ceiling fell in and all the rain, water, and everything,
It stayed.
it stayed. It has not damaged the staircase. It is that covered in wax. Like a bar top,
Yeah.
right?
It was that penetrated with wax.
But if
Oh,
it's
yeah.
but if it's that slippery and slick, I can see somebody
Yeah,
tripping
somebody
and falling,
Oh, yeah.
breaking their neck. Anyway, and stairwells are steep and dark, right?
They probably had hard shoes too. So
I would think
hard
so.
Shoes
I would
on
think so.
Slippery wax wood floor.
So there is actually a cross embedded and planted into the floor where the nun fell and died. Now, whether that cross was there before or after she died, I don't know. Whether it has any significance, I don't know. But that's the story. Now, supposedly, according to the documentary
Yes.
by Rich Whalen, 40 years later, a man was visiting the hotel and he died and he had a heart attack and died on the spot on the cross.
Wow.
I then heard a rumor that man was actually Michael Devereaux's nephew.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So,
Well, that brings a whole new light to it.
yeah, it does. It does. So that happened. The Devereaux, who purchased the house, like I said, turned it into a hotel. Michael died in the house. His wife supposedly stayed there until the house told her to leave. During the time it was a hotel, there was a man on a tour. They were at lots of people, right? And he was taking pictures. And there was a picture online. You guys can find it. Just Google Loftus House photo.
Okay.
It'll be there. Okay. And they discuss that they've caught Anne's photo in the glass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is. I think it's a Pepper's ghost. It's
Yeah,
optical illusion.
okay, that can be.
I think it's a tourist. It
Yeah.
also says not only do you see Anne, but then you see an old woman's face, which could have been one of the nuns.
Really?
I'm sorry, I see tourists.
Yeah.
I mean, there are tourists right there in front.
Yeah, we're talking a little bit of mental matrixing again,
No, it's obviously a person. There is no question. It is obviously a person.
So it shows that, yes.
But I think it's a Pepper's ghost reflection of a woman
could be.
on the walkway who's not in the photo, reflecting in the glass. That's my assessment. Sorry. That's just how I feel about it. Anyway.
Well, no, I mean, that's what this is for. Give everybody's opinion. Yeah.
That's, but my debunking that photo does not mean I'm debunking the activity of the property.
It's the thing when we do a lot of investigations. People get upset the first thing we debunk it. That doesn't mean we're debunking the whole issue here, the whole possibility
and we're
of haunting.
not saying you're lying.
No, it's just that particular piece of evidence doesn't meet criteria, and we have to remove it.
Exactly.
We always
when in doubt, throw it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's always been my saying from eons ago. When in doubt, throw it out.
So the other thing with Richard Whalen's documentary in 1993. Like I said, he's got the facts wrong, the two Annes, and then he has Anne dying before Father Broders comes to the hall, which we've already know that cannot happen.
Yes.
There's a claim that Anne's grave has been found. Okay. And I was listening to another podcast. There's another writer who more recently has written a fiction of this story.
Oh, really?
And he has actually gone and he has seen Father Broders' grave. And they did find Anne in the family vault. Now, he was not able to get into the vault because it was all locked up. But it claims that in the 1940s, that the family vault that she was buried in was broken into and disturbed.
Ah.
And so workers were asked to come in because, how, James Dean's graveyard, right?
Oh, so my God, yeah. Some of the different,
She's a famous person. They're going to try to desecrate or see her grave
or take the tombstone
do something,
or get
right?
souvenirs, yes.
So the workmen were told to concrete up the vault, seal up the vault, which they did. But when they were pulling out the old material and getting everything ready, they looked inside, and one of the coffins, one of the graves, and I don't know if it's a wooden coffin or if it's a stone carved coffin, I don't know, was peaked. So it had a peak in it. Yeah. Which, if the claims are true, I mean, people are known when they go into a catatonic state and are in that, they do freeze in position.
Sure.
So it is possible when she died, she had been sitting and the rigor mortis and the constriction,
modeling,
she could have not been able to be laid flat. So it is possible that her coffin is peaked and that these workers did verify that.
That's kind of neat.
So that is really neat. But
anytime you get verification of or validation, I mean that's really important. It really is. Yeah. Right.
So recent claims, Ghost Adventurers, which I don't even watch that, so I can't say boo-hoo on it because I didn't watch it.
We don't normally put off on other groups, so I'm going to leave it there. Yeah.
And then Ghost Hunters of Ireland, they also had a YouTube. And to be honest, I skimmed that one because it was mostly them talking about themselves and setting up their investigation and what they do and how they go about it, and not a whole lot about the facility. But then they had a brand new team member. Okay, and I put this in air quotes because I think it was done for the sake of the video or the documentary, what they were doing.
Yes.
They send him alone to the third floor of the house. And later, when they can't find him, why is he going to come back? You would never send a new member alone. No. You don't send a member alone,
you send a regular member alone, yeah.
Right. They later find him in a trance.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Whatever.
Yeah, where you believe or not.
Take that with a grain of salt, right?
Okay.
Destination Fear, now it was Project Fear, but when they were Destination Fear, Zach Bagans sent them to Loftus Hall. And in the Devil's Room, which has been done up to look very macabre with red silk drapings all over the beds and everything, right?
Gives it the demure. Yeah.
Right. They did get the bed squeak. And it seemed, their reaction seemed legitimate.
Okay.
And the sound seemed legitimate to me. But again, I'm not there, so I can't say it's legitimate. It didn't look put on, that one. And, of course, Destination Fear is known for sleeping alone and being isolated. That's what they do.
Yeah. Single isolation experiments. Yeah.
So they put Tanner in the tapestry room, and they took the closet, and they barricaded him in that room. So he was alone in Anne's position in that room.
Barricaded to boot, yeah.
Yeah, barricaded to boot. Now, you cannot see the outside of this door when this happens. So bear that in mind. There is a loud bang on the door.
Yes.
Now, at this time, the rest of the team is upstairs on the other 3 people are upstairs on the 3rd floor. Okay.
Quite a ways away from where Tanner is being sequestered.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these 4 guys, they don't have a cameraman following them around. They are their cameramen.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's really only the 4 of them. Yeah. So.
And sometimes
but who knows how it was edited?
Who
knows how it was edited? But anyway, they are on the 3rd floor.
Yeah.
Tanner's walkie stops working. He cannot contact the team. There is a glitch where they hear Tanner's voice when they're upstairs, but then their walkies glitch out. And then you hear running footsteps outside the tapestry room, and then there's another bang on the tapestry room.
Wow.
So that did happen to Tanner, and he did freak out entirely because you don't know who's on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah, because, and for me, the scariest thing is what if somebody has come into the hall and there's a live person on the other side? That would terrify me more.
People always ask us, aren't you scared of the ghost? No, I fear the living.
Yeah, totally.
They're a lot more dangerous than the ghost. Yeah,
totally. There are places I'm like,
just some stranger
I'm not going because I can't secure the location enough to prove that some vagabond isn't going to come in.
Exactly.
And that's what's more terrifying. But then, of course, they sleep alone at night, right?
Yes.
Dakota is on the 3rd floor, which is where supposedly this shadow apparition is.
Sure. Now, how close is that to the tapestry room? Not related at all.
No,
Okay.
No, all the way up on the 3rd floor.
Okay.
He's laying down, and there is a shadow caught leaning out of the doorway.
Wow.
And he doesn't see it. He doesn't react to it. It's not caught until post-production. But you can see a person leaning outside. Oh, that was kind of cool. But the most interesting thing I found, and where I caught some of this other information I've given already, is there's a YouTube podcast. It's a podcast, but it's on YouTube. So they show pictures of when they were investigating. But they're talking like we're talking here in a podcast, overimposed on top of that video. And it's called the Paranormal Research of Ireland Team.
Oh.
So, and that's where I got the layout. I had to pause it and rewind because I was drawing the layout of Loftus Hall by their videos of when they were there. Yeah. So they show the mosaic tile entry when they walk in. They show the grand staircase. They show the card room. Then they walk through the other room, and then they walk into the tapestry room. And then there's actually a chapel from the time when it was the convent, the nunnery. There's a chapel next to the tapestry room. I don't know how long the chapel was there, if it was originally part of, the Loftus Hall and Redmond Hall, or if they converted a room into the chapel. I don't know. But I found it interesting that chapel was right next door to the tapestry room. That was interesting to me. But, so that was really cool. It was like walking through Loftus Hall. And like I said, the few things that I learned about with the Devereaux, that's where I learned that Michael Devereaux died in Loftus. And that's where I learned that the man who died at the Nuns was Michael Devereaux's nephew. Yeah. Now, this team has been to Loftus Hall at least 10 times over the intervening years before it was sold to the hotel developers. So they knew Aidan Quigley very well. They had been here several times. And their accounts of what happened to them are really interesting. They were sleeping in the tapestry room on their blow-up mattresses and whatever. And it is pitch black. There's no electricity in the hall at this time. And most of their team can sleep, but these 2 people always have a hard time sleeping overnight in their locations. Yeah. So they were awake kind of whispering to each other.
That makes sense. I mean, you think about it, yeah.
Right? So they were whispering to each other, and then they hear the tapestry door open. And they hear footsteps coming across. Well, it is so dark that they don't know if one of their team has gotten up and is walking around the room or not. Sure. So they call out.
It's Anne.
It's Anne. And the next thing you know, the footsteps go away and the door closes again.
Wow.
Now that's cool and
Anne's
creepy.
been known to do that.
Anne has been known to do that. She's been known to walk down the hall, open the tapestry room, and go across the tapestry room to her closet.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? I mean,
I think that is. I think
that
it
was really
yeah.
neat. That was really
I
neat.
tell you what we need to do for the next Scottish holiday. We need to do a deep dive because there's one castle. I'm going to tell you right off the bat. Anybody out there, hey, post it on Facebook if you got the answers. There's a Scottish castle. And again, we talked about earlier how all these stories kind of go together with dealing with the devil. And this is where the devil comes to play cards. And it's in a castle, and they actually end up walling up the room after it happens. But the devil comes and gets beat. And it's kind of like almost, you can sit back and look, hey, Charlie Daniels may have read this story at some point.
Yep.
You know, you get
Yep.
that. So,
Yep.
well, I tell you what, as we start, do you have any more before we wrap up?
No, but I am going to just give a little blurb about today's
Sure.
ghost story of the day and give a little disclaimer. When I speak and when I say names and sites,
Yeah.
I try to say them as authentically as possible. I'm not making fun. I'm
No.
not mimicking.
We're
just,
not Dick Van Dyke. This is not meant to be disrespectful.
No, it's not. It's just
Yeah.
when I hear something, my voice tends to put that inflection on it. And a funny
Sure.
story, and I'm going to just totally embarrass myself entirely.
No, let's do this.
My family in Belgium,
Mm-hmm.
when I went to visit them a few years ago,
Yes,
they speak English to me because I don't speak French.
sure.
But their English is in a French accent.
Okay,
Of course. I mean,
that makes
I
sense.
speak back to them in my English with a fake French accent because my brain hears their pronunciation and
Sure.
my brain automatically reduplicates that. So when you hear me put a twist on this, an Irish twist, I'm not doing it in jest. It just,
Yeah.
it feels natural to me to do it that way. And today's ghost story of the day actually comes from an Irish newspaper. So there's going to be Irish words on it that I'm going to say
Well,
the way I say it.
One
so.
quick little thing I want to add to that. When the guys come up last time I was in England, we got laughing because somebody said, I said something, I said, what kind of dialect you have? And he says, well, it doesn't really matter as long as you don't do the dialect of Dick Van Dyke.
Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, because they hate the fact that Mary Poppins, Dick Van Dyke did this very fake, and and recently I
Yeah.
showed Heather's funny YouTube video. If you search Scottish voice activated elevator.
Oh my God.
Oh,
is
and that's
so
hilarious. And the one guy says, well, I'll try it in English. And he says something. He says, what are you? He says, you're from the same part of England as Dick Van Dyke? Yeah, I mean, oh my God. It's a very hated thing. And actually, there's a YouTube video. Dick Van Dyke is still alive at the time of this taping. And he actually addresses that. And it's kind of funny how he learned it. But they always say that's the thing. Don't do that because it's almost a mocking way. But
Yeah,
I mean,
and I don't mean it in a mocking way.
You're trying to do the best you can.
Right.
So, well, before we go to the ghost story of the day, there's a couple of things I want to leave you with. One is Happy St. Patrick's Day, and I tell you, every Scotsman, everybody out there becomes a little Irish on St. Patrick's Day. I'll be at the Indianapolis St. Patrick's Day parade, walking with the Scottish Society. I and my wife Heather. I'd like to read a couple of things which I find kind of amusing. You know, the Scottish have a wonderful sense of humor, but the Irish, I think, actually have a better sense of humor. And I was once caught up with a friend of mine. We were talking about the day when we die, what we want on our tombstone. And he had some of the best stuff. And I tell you what, the Irish are really good at this. And so I'm going to read this to you. This was put on the back of an Irishman's tombstone. And I believe it's in Kilgarny is where it was at. But it says, "Stop, traveler, and cast an eye. As you are now, so once was I. Prepare in time, make no delay. For youth and time will pass away. Prepare yourself to follow me." And some Irishman had taken a piece of cardboard and wrote and put it on the back. It says, "Man, I am content to follow you. I only wish I knew which way you went." And, that's true Irish humor. Now, I'm going to read you two more before we go to the ghost story of the day. These are two. One is a couple. They're both Irish blessings. "May those who love us, and those who don't love us, may God turn their hearts. And if he can't turn their hearts, may he turn their ankles, so we will know them by their limping." This is the last one, and probably my favorite. I've used this a lot when I play pipes on St. Patrick's Day. "May you have all the happiness and luck that life can hold. May you find a pot of gold at the end of all your rainbows. May the roof over your head always be strong. May you be in heaven a half an hour before the devil knows you're dead." That's my favorite. So with that, folks, that's all we have tonight on Ghost to Ghost. I hope you really enjoyed our Irish special. And that was written by Jennifer Verne, and she did a great job as always. Having said that, we are going to get ready to move to the ghost story of the day. And that is also with Jennifer. So stay tuned. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chief Lawson from Spirit Paranormal Indiana and from the podcast Ghost to Ghost. I'd like to make a special announcement. On April the 7th, at the Murat Theater of Old National Center, Dustin Perry of Taps fame will be making a one-night-only appearance. Come spend the night with Dustin as he recounts some of his previous cases and investigation techniques. Spirit Indiana will also be there to assist Dustin in any way we can. And please watch our Facebook page as we are working out a special price for tickets that will be announced on our Facebook page. And by using that, you will get a special discount on the tickets you purchase. Again, this is April the 7th. Please pass the word. Come out and spend a night. Listen to Dustin Perry. You won't regret it. Again, this is Chief Lawson, and thank you so much for listening to Ghost to Ghost. All right, listeners, welcome to Ghost Story of the Day. Today's presenter will be Jennifer Verne, our research manager on Spirit.
Today's Ghost Story of the Day, The Irish Times, 16 March 2017, by Dean Ruxton. 131 years ago, on Saturday, March 17th, the Weekly Irish Times published some spooky Irish stories on its front page as part of its series of Fireside Tales of Many Counties. Here, unedited, as it was printed on Paddy's Day, 1888. I'll be reading the second story, The Woman in White. Pat Gill, of the county of Kildare, was driving towards Dublin with a load of country produce. He had made a comfortable seat for himself on the car, and had plenty of hay about him and under him. He was pleasantly employed, thinking of nothing in particular, dozing and giving an eye to the proceedings of his beast. He was between the mill of Baltracy and the crossroads of Borheen, when he was startled by the appearance of a woman, dressed in long white clothes, crossing the fence and advancing onto the road. She came to the horse and walked on with him, close by his neck. The driver chucked the beast's head to the opposite side for fear he should tread on her feet or long robes. But she still kept as close to him as before, and sometimes he thought he could see the lower part of the horse's foreleg through her dress. The matter had now become very serious. He could not keep his eyes off the apparition, and he felt his whole frame covered with a cold perspiration. He became bewildered, and could not determine either on going or stopping. So the horse, finding matters left to himself, jogged on, apparently unconscious of his fellow wayfarer. The center of the crossroads of Borheen is, or was, occupied by a patch of green turf, and when they came to its edge, the white figure stood still, while a portion of the shaft of the car on that side seemed to pass through her. Gill, observing this, drew the beast at once to the other side, crying in a male voice made tremulous by terror. "By your leave, ma'am," went on horse and car, the edge of the road preventing him from seeing the white form. Having advanced 2 or 3 yards, he looked back, fearing to see a maligned body on the road behind him. But he saw instead the white appearance standing in the center of the plot of grass, her hand seeming to shade her eyes as she looked earnestly after him. Terrified as he was, he never turned his gaze till a bend in the road cut off the view. The neighborhood of Borheen, Baltracy, and Rothcoffey was blessed, or the contrary, in times past by a fortune-teller and charm-conter, Molly Anthony by name. So unedifying was her life and conversation that the priest refused to have any religious services performed for her after her death. She left a son who had acquired some skill in curing cattle by herbs, and did not pretend any supernatural gifts. A farmer, Pat Bain, at whose house he had remained about a fortnight, and who was well pleased with his performances, was passing near the green hill in his jaunting car, accompanied by Jack Anthony, the doctor, when on a sudden an old woman in a red cloak appeared before them between the bushes on the road fence, and cried, "Jack, it's time for you to come." "Sir," said Jack to his patron, "will you excuse me for a minute while I go say a word to this neighbor of mine?" "Oh, to be sure." Jack got on the fence and passed through the bushes, but the farmer was surprised at not subsequently hearing the sound of his or her voice. He waited for about a space of a minute, and then bade his servant to climb the fence and see if Jack was about to return. The servant did as he was told, and the master observed him looking along the inner side of the ditch, now to the left and then to the right, and straight before him with a perplexed expression. The master sprung down, joined his servant, and found he had a long range of vision right to left and up the sloping side of the hill, and no bushes or rocks could afford concealment. Neither Jack nor the red-cloaked woman were in view. It was months before the doctor presented himself to his patron, and even then his account of his disappearance was not consistent. This writer is acquainted with Pat and Jack, and heard the former related the adventure.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air, or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd., all rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.